starting on $80,000 a year, a 10-year period, acquired $7.6 million worth of real estate that today nets him a six-figure income.
Most people can save up $20,000 a year. I spent $204,000. Now that is attainable.
I know it's going to be a bit controversial in points. I see in this country right now that the middle class is disappearing. COVID created huge space between those people who owned assets and those people who didn't. What would you say to those people? What ideas would you have to help them get on the ladder?
I always knew I wanted to exit corporate and retire early. I caught myself off guard doing it so soon. My title, my status is all gone, and I'm without a purpose. I was going through an existential crisis. What the hell am I going to do with my life?
I've got 25 grand. I've got three other mates that have got 25 grand. Would you recommend me going and buying a property? Or if I've got an idea, go after that business?
What is up, guys? Welcome to this edition of Unemployable. Today, we have a very special guest. Brett Mifsud and his partner Jess are here in the studio. Jess is sitting off camera. Brett is sitting here at the desk. This is a really interesting discussion that I know at points is going to be divisive. Brett basically started out of university, went into a job, making $80,000 a year, bought all these properties off his own bat over a 10-year period, starting from an $80,000 a year salary, never having a business or side hustle in that time, built a property portfolio of $7.5 million by basically starting with a cheap, crappy product in regional Australia, then improving it slightly, saving up a deposit for his second property, improving it slightly, using some of the equity to draw out and buy another one. We go through this journey of how Brett did it, and we talk about what is different from when he started back in 2012 up until today. And we got all of the panel's input on what they would do today, given the massive increase in the cost of living, the fact that property prices have gone through the roof, and how young people today can actually get onto the property ladder even today with these massive price increases and a massive increase in what the average household income is, and the gap between that and the cost of real estate today, and how the cost of living has also gone up. So we do confront that very difficult and real problem that are facing so many young people who are yet to get involved in the real estate market in Australia. We also talk about Brett's new startup, which is called Vertigrow, which is a very clever patented idea that him and his wife came up with, and how that idea can be woven into the wealth creation plans of anybody looking to create wealth and increase their borrowability for property and so on by starting a side hustle. We talk about their journey of learning that, only a couple of years ago, and how they've now patented it. They're selling it at markets, and it's making a huge difference to their income as well. So, guys, this is a really interesting pod. It's not as sexy as, startup entrepreneurs who've made millions. This is about creating wealth, not quickly, but surely, through real estate investment that doesn't require you to be a salesy person or a sales-oriented person or a person with a big personality, just somebody with a methodical approach to increasing your wealth. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. I'll see you on the other side. Here's a fun fact about our show. We put a ton of effort into making these podcasts for you. The one thing that we would love for you to do if you actually get value out of the pod is just hit that subscribe button. By doing that, it helps us get better guests on the show because they can see that we have a bigger audience. So if you're enjoying the content, just hit the subscribe button below, and then throughout the podcast, drop a comment so that we know that we're hitting the mark or how we can improve. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the episode. What is up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Unemployable. Today, we are joined in the studio by Brett Mifsud, who has an awesome story that I know you guys are absolutely going to love. This story is for the everyday Australian or everyday working class person who wants to find a way out of the rat race into what Robert Kiyosaki calls the fast track of wealth creation. It's not easy. Well, it's actually simple, but it's not easy. It takes some discipline. But Brett's story is really interesting because he is a guy that held down a job and starting on $80,000 a year, worked really hard and saved as much as he could to get into the real estate business, and working in a job without a business over a 10-year period, he acquired $7.6 million worth of real estate that today, after mortgage payments, nets him a 6-figure income just off the rent roll. And there's a whole bunch of other interesting numbers that we're going to go through. And we're going to be talking to Brett about exactly step by step how he did it, where he bought, how he added millions of dollars of net worth to his family as a result of following this tried and true path of Australian real estate, just old-fashioned, simple brick and mortar wealth creation. So with that said, Brett, welcome to the pod. How you doing, mate?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, move that mic in nice and close. Just swing it over towards you, the whole thing. Yeah, there you go. And great to have Jess here as well, your lovely partner. I haven't seen Jess for a while. We were chatting up Brisbane at a party. How long ago was that? 6 months, or maybe, I think it's longer. It might be a year ago.
You were chatting Brett's wife up at a party. Can you
6 or 7 months ago.
Can you please?
Yeah. Adam failed to deliver because Jess said if she'd ever leave me, she needs a GT3 RS out of it. So there you go.
Mate, I'm sure she'll get a GT3 RS out of you these days. Fantastic. You're a rep head then, Jess. Oh, wow. Well, a proper petrol head with a GT3 RS. My God. James, how are you, buddy?
Good, mate. Good. Looking forward to a different pace with this pod. We're getting set back into the standard 2 milk and sugar stuff of real estate investing. So looking forward to unpacking this and get into the nitty gritty.
For those of you who are not wound up to James' speed, he's just said the 2 milk and sugars. That's a very country statement, James.
Grew up in the country.
You did. Yeah. You grew up in the country. Nice to have you with us. This is going to be interesting because normally we've got sort of high-flying entrepreneurs that feel a long way out of reach for a lot of people because, you get these super smart people like, not to say that you're not super smart, Brett, by any stretch, but like last week we had on, Atu, who raised, $46 million US for a tech startup and just this insane story. And like, even I watch that and go, man, that just seems so far away for me. Whereas buying houses in regional Australia and major cities is very accessible. People understand it. And you're living proof that, hey, you don't have to be a high-flying tech person or a high-flying entrepreneur. You can actually become a multimillionaire just by following a simple path of acquiring property. So we're looking forward to that. Eric, you're a property man and a businessman. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you. Just wanted to say thanks for the reminder of James being raised in the country, because for those of you guys not watching on YouTube, he's dressed up as Woody today from Toy Story with that denim shirt. Definitely from the country. That's for sure.
Well, at least look like Woody instead of wearing again, we ripped you enough about that last crocheted piece of shit that you had on at the boat party, and you decided to rock up with a fucking another doiling fuse fucking shirt. What the hell?
Just to piss you off.
Mate. You guys comment on each other's clothing and fashion sense just a little bit too much.
He comments on mine. He doesn't have it.
There you go.
No, honestly, I'm excited. I love real estate. I'm reading a bit of a spreadsheet here that Brett gave us before the pod, and I got my calculator out, and I got some numbers to go over. So I love it, man. Yeah,
you love your numbers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting for those watching to see here. We got this. We were furnished with a 6 or 7 page report from Brett when he arrived. Not a report, just a speaking points. But this is why you're successful, is because you've thought through the numbers, and real estate is really about numbers. And some of these places you've bought are proper shitholes. And so if it wasn't about about the numbers, like I think you described one of your properties as a Mexican prison.
It is. Yeah, it was. Sorry, I did a community service by demolishing it.
Yeah, right. So
I was known to the police and everything.
Yeah. So you they are proper shitholes. They're not sexy, but they've made money for you, which is really, really cool. So we're going to jump into all that and a lot more. And we're also going to talk about your new startup, which you and Jess have started, called Vertigrow, which is actually interesting part of the story as well, because this is going to fill a gap for you, which we'll talk about later in the pod. But this is a really cool thing. So we're going to talk about Vertigrow and what this is. It's actually a really cool little product. It's patented. There's great packaging. There's a big market for it. So we're going to jump into that as well. Before we do, I just want to thank our sponsors, as always, Early Bird AI. If you run a business of any kind and you want to be more efficient, you want to save money, you want more leads, you want to improve your workflow, go and check out the guys at earlybird.ai. That's EARLI, Bird, earlybird.ai. They are a consultancy that, for free, as long as you qualify, and your business must be doing over $500,000 a year in revenue, you can go to their website. They will do a one-on-one call with you for free. They'll do a deep dive into your business. look at where the opportunities for AI to leverage and save you money, increase your leads, increase your conversion rate, make you more money. They'll do a free audit of your business. And at the end of that, they'll come back to you in a few days after that and present you with a sort of a plan that you could integrate AI into your business. AI is not the future of business. It is the now of business. If you are not thinking about AI, you are giving your competitors runway to dominate market share that could be yours very, very affordably. So go talk to the guys. It is a really interesting business. Full disclosure, Eric and I are the investors that have financed their business to get going, but they are absolutely swamped with business at the moment. But go and check them out. It's a great team over there, and they're making a lot of difference for people. So thank you for that. All right. Moving on, let's talk about your story, Brett. So high level, how would you describe your journey? If somebody said, Brett, what makes you, what's interesting about this? How would you describe your story and what draws people into your message?
Yeah, I think my story is possibly similar to a lot of people growing up, in terms of going to university and just getting a job. That's where a lot of people find themselves. I had a decision to make at the end of school. Do I start a business or do I go to university, which, seems to be the path that a fair few people take, and get a corporate job and go down that path. So that's what I did. But I knew right from the outset that it wasn't going to make me wealthy. All right, it would give me an income enough to probably live comfortably on. But real wealth creation is through either owning a business that does very well or through investing in a high net worth asset, or at least assets that grow in value sustainably over time. For me, real estate was that vehicle. Tried shares. I don't have the discipline for it, checking the stock price every single day and see it go up and then go down and then selling out. And it just wasn't for me. So real estate is, because you can keep your finger on the pulse, but at longer intervals of time, which was good. So typically over longer time, you sort of see it ticking up, not necessarily going down so much. So that sort of resonated with me. And I personally like the bricks and mortar aspect and the fact that I'm in total control of the entire asset and everything that happens with it. So what I did is, as I was working, I started to learn how to invest in real estate. I went to courses, so many courses, bought books, John Fitzgerald, 7 Steps to Wealth, Robert Kiyosaki, his book. The American books have nuggets of information in them, but they're not 100% applicable to the Australian sort of real estate market. So I got around and did a lot of, events, went to a lot of events from Australian speakers. And so I drew a lot of information out of that. And I just picked out what everybody was saying was common, which was buy average properties in good areas that people want to live, particularly families that are either at market value or slightly below for a number of reasons. It might be a distressed sale with a relatively good cash flow, so you can continue to move forward. That's really the nuts and bolts of it.
And all houses, right?
Yeah, I mean, I bought a couple of units. The units impact your cash flow because you've got additional costs, whereas houses don't. Additional costs, as an example, would be body corporate. But I did have a couple of units in there that they're sold now, but predominantly houses. Newer houses are better than older houses because you get a larger depreciation. So I tried to do that where appropriate, or I did a renovation in order to maximize my tax position, which we'll probably get into. But the bottom line for me was every house was just a stepping stone to the next one. So what I always tried to do is never max myself out from a borrowing capacity perspective. And I tried to ensure that I knew what the banks were looking for in order to get the next subsequent purchase. So I was focusing really heavily on my mortgage brokers to tell me, if I buy this house, how quickly can I buy the next one? Which is an unusual question that I've been, sort of the feedback from them is, no one really asked this. But for me, I wanted a large portfolio and I wanted to be able to continue moving forward. So over the course of 10 years, I acquired about 9 properties, but I subdivided some of them, so 12 in total. And then sort of just built that up step by step by step.
What's got my attention on your sheet here is your cash contribution to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part that gives people a lot of hope. So the portfolio, you've sold some properties down to pay down debt, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you acquired, the peak value of these properties when you were holding them all was $7.6 million. How much cash did you contribute along the way to acquire all that?
Yeah. My cash contribution in totality was $393,000
Over 10 years.
over 10 years. And actually that statistic is a little bit thrown out by a particular outlier. I've got one line item in there where I put $200,000 or $190,000 of my own money into a renovation, which was extremely unusual. And we'll get to that property most likely because it was cursed from day dot.
So you spent $200,000 on it after you bought it.
Yeah. But up until that point, with the portfolio worth probably about 7.4 million, 7.3, I spent $204,000. Now that is attainable. So most people can save up $20,000 a year over a period of 10 years.
So you're saying that if you take out that one outlier where you had to spend all this cash, because I know the story and we'll get to it, that one that basically was a nightmare and you had to drop all this money on it, you take that out,
Yep.
you were into it for about $200,000 of your own money and the property portfolio was worth about 7.4.
Yeah, that's right.
That's incredible.
$200,000 of money that I saved up for, coming from my corporate job and things like that.
Sorry, but that's just for the viewers and listeners out there. That's over time. It wasn't $200,000 wedge in one hit. It might have been a deposit for one,
That's right.
a semi-deposit for another, and some cash over here. It
That's
wasn't a $200 lump. So you don't have to wait 10 years to get involved is the point.
Correct.
Yep.
And for those that are listening and doing the mathematics at home, they might be like, well, how can $200,000 hold, $7 million worth of property? The other additional money that's needed, I drew out of equity. So as properties grew, and they grew faster than I could save, particularly towards the end of this journey, I used the equity to fund the next purchase. And then as that grew, pulled the equity back out and did it again. And that is an extremely powerful tool, if used wisely, to be able to compound the effect of your portfolio growth.
So you use the growth in the property to get a deposit for the next one rather than just saving a loan.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And obviously, over time, also rents increase, so it increase your serviceability. So it's not all reliant off the back of your job.
Yeah, 100%. So rent, I did a quick calculation before coming on. Rent at the peak of my holdings, at the start, more so, was close to $200,000. And then over time it grew. Rents rise about 4 to 5% a year. Obviously, COVID is an anomaly to that, and rents are going through the roof at the moment, but typically 4 to 5% a year. Peak rent was $276,000 gross.
I'd like to take you back to 2012 when you bought your first initial property.
Yep.
And explain how much money you had at that time to invest in that property, how you saved that money, where did it come from, and how much were you earning at that point in time?
Yeah, so I was earning about $80,000. I was out of uni 1 or 2 years, working just an entry-level corporate job. I was saving for about 2 years. That's not uncommon now. Like, people have to save for years to get their foot on the property ladder. I thought I knew a lot more about property than I did because I went to all these seminars, read all these books. I was like, okay, do you know what I need? I need a brand new property or nearabouts in a capital city. I would have been saving for 5 years. And a property came along in Coffs Harbour, which is where I grew up, and I'm desperate to get out of there, and I certainly didn't want to invest there. But my dad is a real estate agent. He sells farms and rural properties. Been doing so for 40 years. His real estate office came across this listing, and he said, hey, Brett, this is not in my field, but this might be a good investment. And I thought, you don't know anything about investing, Dad. Like, all you do is you sell properties and you sell farms, for that matter, not residential real estate. And he's like, well, yeah, you could continue saving, or you could get your foot on the property ladder. And that was kind of powerful advice. So I went down, had a look at it. It was a mortgagee in possession property. So the former owners defaulted on their obligations to the bank, so the bank repossessed it. And it had termite damage, which realistically throws a lot of people, a lot of prospective buyers for a loop. So desirability is quite low. And it was in a suburb of Coffs Harbour called Taormina, which is pretty blue collar, and wasn't particularly desirable for me. I begrudgingly bought it, right? Because I thought, if I do get this property, at least my foot's like, I've got a rung on the ladder, on the property ladder. And if it grows a little bit in value and I continue to save, I'll be able to get my next purchase, maybe somewhere where I want to, like Brisbane, a little bit quicker. So I did it. And I'll tell you what, I was a nightmare to deal with. I got the contract. The solicitors gave me the contract, and it was a standard contract. And I crossed out all of the standard conditions. Like, I'm not agreeing to this. I'm not agreeing to this. I'm not agreeing to this. And my Dad called me up because the solicitors were like, what is this guy doing? Like, it's a standard contract with standard terms and conditions. The bank is not going to negotiate with him on any of this. And Dad just said, mate, put your head in. Like, I know you've read all these books, but you're way out of line. Just agree to it, purchase the property, and move forward. I did that. And then the fun came, which was the property wasn't in great condition. It wasn't in bad condition by any stretch, but it wasn't great. So it required a cosmetic renovation. So I took all my mates down there. I've got a whole heap of Brazilian mates up in Brisbane. They all know who I'm talking about. I plastered them with beer and alcohol. There's a photograph that I've sent you guys. Like the car is full of alcohol. I'm like, you guys are coming down to Coffs Harbour. We're going painting for 3 days. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And so
Eric, just for Eric, he's not sure what a mate is. It's people that like you, but carry on.
So brought the boys down. I'd never painted a house before. None of them had held a paintbrush, let alone anything else. So like there was more paint on the carpet than on the drop sheets. And we got stuck into it. Mission brown was the color we were trying to eliminate.
Sexy.
It's the worst color in the history of man.
Is that the same color as Adam's shirt?
All right. Carry on, Brett.
It's not a bad color, Adam.
So you got drunk Brazilians.
And I got drunk Brazilians in the house, and we painted it. We did a pretty good job. We also knocked out a wall, a non-load bearing wall. Dad helped me with that. I know how to swing a hammer, but it's swinging the hammer at the right thing. And we got rid of the termites. So we got a building and pest report. This is really important. Before buying any property, building and pest inspection reports are critical. So you sort of know the ins and outs of what's happening behind the areas you can't see. We knew the termites had been treated. They were dead. The damage was apparently limited based on the report's findings, although it wasn't an invasive report. It was just visual, but you could see them coming through the skirtings and the architraves. So bit of plaster came off. We repaired the frame, which was good. Timber house, repaired the frame, easy. Got a plasterer to plaster that back up because I can't hang rock sheet for shit. And that was it.
So step us through that. So it was $278,000. Is that right? This first one?
Yeah, first property, $278,000.
How much did you spend on, how much deposit and how much did you spend on the reno?
Yeah, total cost for $47,000. So I didn't have a...
Is that including the Brazos?
The beers?
Yeah. And that's from the Brazos?
The Brazilians.
They're Brazilians. Well, I didn't pay them. I paid them a bit.
That's
the beer economy.
So this is your deposit, the cost of doing everything.
Yeah.
So $47,000 of your cash in.
Yes.
On a $278,000 purchase.
Correct. So the deposit, so I try over time, I try to aim for a 20% deposit because you avoid lender's mortgage insurance.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, I didn't have 20%, obviously.
Mm-hmm. What was your deposit out of the $47,000? What was the deposit amount you actually put down?
It was about $19,000.
So yeah, to a low deposit.
Yeah, it was a low deposit.
That's like a 7% deposit.
Exactly. I paid LMI begrudgingly, but you do what you got to do to get your first property.
LMI,
lender's mortgage insurance.
Yeah, but just on that though, you can capitalise LMI. Or back in the day, you could anyway. So you're not actually out of pocket for it. You just pay interest on it.
Correct.
So it's not a real out of pocket. So you can buy one property, pay the 20, or you can buy two with LMI that's capitalised on the end, and you get two instead of one.
Yeah, that's true. What I was concerned about with LMI is it's not transferable between lenders. So when interest rates change, and I was quite interest rate sensitive, as a lot of people are now, interest rates were about 6.5% back then, by the way, so fairly comparable. I wanted to pay as little as I can, right, on interest, so I wanted to maximize my cash flow position. So when you pay lender's mortgage insurance, it's the bank taking out an insurance policy against that loan with that bank. So if you go to refinance and you still don't have 20%, you're up for LMI all over again. So I was really, really conscious about that. So I found a bank with a good interest rate. I locked in that rate, which was appropriate at the time, and paid the LMI and moved forward.
Was it just you or was it you and Jess borrowing at this point?
No, it's just me. So
just you.
all of the properties bar one, which is my very, very last purchase, I did by myself.
Okay.
My fiance watched the journey from afar. I think there's a pretty interesting story about the second property where she's like, it's your money, do whatever the fuck you want.
So how long you been with Jess for, back from the beginning? So what are we going to do?
I'm looking across because Jess is sitting on the couch, and where's my memory?
Where I'm going is this is irrelevant of who you did it on your own or not, the half hers.
we have an arrangement. Except if Jess moves to get a Porsche GT3 RS. So all bets are off. I'm keeping my portfolio.
So okay. I just want to pause here because I know that a lot of young people are going to be listening, rolling their eyes right now going, here we go. Old people telling us about back in the day when properties were 278,000. Now you need 278,000 for a deposit on a shithole in Coomera. Like not quite there, but it's not far off being there. So I just want to make a point at this moment in the pod that we will, at the end of this pod, have a chat about what we would do given property prices today, and the fact that young people listening to this, a lot of them coming out of uni are not going to be on more than 80 grand today. So incomes haven't changed in that time much at all. Like your 80 grand today is still today relevant, but the property prices have gone up by a factor of at least 2-3 times since then. So we will come back to that, guys. So stick with us, because I do want to have a chat about that with Brett and with the boys about what we would do today. So this is helpful for you no matter where you are. So Brett, that's cool. So you get this property, you get your Brazilian mates to come in, you spend $47,000 in total. What happened next from there?
Yeah, what happened next was a state of despair. I didn't know it at the time, but the Coffs Harbour market was pretty flat. Actually, the property market in general back then was pretty flat.
This is 2012, guys, for those listening.
I was expecting, like, if anyone's bought property recently, or if they've seen any media recently, particularly from buyers agents, we've got 100% return in the past 4 years. Well, that's COVID for you. Back then, property was quite flat and it wasn't moving much at all. So,
especially regional property.
100%. Regional property is affordable, but it lags the capitals. So I went through a little bit of a state of despair. I'm like, oh shit, I really need this property to actually grow in value so I can then afford the next one. It didn't grow enough. So I had to continue to save up for the next property. And I was prepared to save for years. And I didn't want another regional property. I just did that begrudgingly, as I said. I wanted it in a capital city. Well, an interesting thing happened, the 2011 floods in Brisbane. And while the rest of Australia's capital cities, property prices were starting to move up and really get some speed and still unaffordable for me, the floods in Brisbane decimated the areas that the floods impacted. And so a year after the floods, when the property prices were still quite low in those flood-impacted suburbs, I stumbled across a property that was another distressed sale on realestate.com. Like I spent so much time after work on realestate.com looking at suburbs within a 20-kilometre radius of Brisbane, to the point where I felt like I could be a real estate agent. I knew what good value looked like in each suburb. And then I dragged Jess, my fiance, around to open homes, and eventually stumbled across this property. And the photos, I'll show you guys the photos. It was a disaster, to the point where the real estate agent said, can you guys please remove your shoes before you come inside? And Jess scoffed and said, it's cleaner outside in the dirt than it is inside the house. And there's a photo, I left a handprint on the wall outside. The house was so disgusting, but I saw value in it. The reason how I saw value in it is because a few factors. Over the street, same size blocks had been developed a few years earlier. And what they were asking for this property was half of the price of a developed property. So it was like looking into a crystal ball. I'm like, if I buy this and I just develop it, knock the house, develop it, it's already on 2 blocks of land, I will instantly double my money. Now, we're in a depressed market as well. So I know, it'll rebound. People have short memories. Well, short enough in the real estate cycle. So I knew Brisbane property was going to come back. And this property, while it was flood affected, it was barely flood affected. And I knew I could put houses on there. I don't really need to raise the houses or anything like that because it was a 1 in 100-year flood. The building envelope, when I looked into it, was unaffected. So that was perfect for me.
This is a house in Rockley, Brisbane. It's on 2 blocks of land. Do you recall how big those blocks were, just out of interest?
Yeah, they're 405 each. But they're really narrow and extremely long. So 7-metre frontage, so a really, really narrow frontage, but extremely long.
But 2 side by side?
Yeah, side by
side. 14-metre frontage for your property, and you bought it for $243,500.
Yeah, $243,500.
And how much deposit did you put down on that one? Because you said you had to save for the deposit, correct?
Yeah, I had to save for the deposit. So that was a 10% deposit. I paid LMI again. And then the rest went into a renovation.
So it says here your invested capital was 34,000 on that. So 10% deposit is about 25 and then another 10 grand on top.
That's right.
In reno.
Yep.
So back then, I mean, you're on 80 grand or so a year. This is a year after the initial house. You didn't pull out any equity out of that because the market was flat.
Market was flat.
You then saved up another $20,000. How did you do that? Like, how are you on a wage of 80,000 and you still got to pay tax, I'm assuming?
Yeah, of course.
On the 80,000, right? So this is not after tax dollars. You got to pay tax on it.
Yes, I pay tax.
So
were you living at home with mum and dad or no avocado?
Yeah, how do you save? Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, what did you go without? Because my biggest thing I always ask people is what are you willing to go without? Because to save $20,000 on an $80,000 salary, that's very difficult. So explain a little bit on what you had to do or what you went without.
Yep. Jess and I were renting. We were renting in not a fancy place, right? So we kept our expenses low. I kept my expenses low.
Jeez.
Well, that GT3 ours is looking pretty good.
It's just mind games, Jess. I went without buying a new car. I drove a shit heap. I went without going to fancy restaurants. I just wore basic clothes. I mean, anybody who's met me in corporate knows that I dressed terribly. Probably like either of you two.
Guess he's not coming back.
I purposely kept my expenses really, really low. I paid off my credit card or paid it down as much as I could. I still had a credit card debt, which absolutely hits your borrowing capacity. But I knew sacrifices needed to be made. The other thing I did is this was a principal place of residence property, right? So stamp duty was deferred. And stamp duty is a huge part of your initial capital. So I was smart with that. I did the same thing with the house in Tormina as well. I said it was a principal place of residence, and then I allowed me to defer that stamp duty payment for up to 12 months, which gave me more time to then save up.
No, you could do that.
Absolutely, you can do it because your circumstances can change. So at the point in time in which you purchase the property, you have to declare is it a principal place of residence or is it an investment? And so I declared it's principal place of residence because my intention was live in it. But then my circumstances changed.
I tried to do that on a property, except there was a vacant block of land. And they caught on very, very quickly.
You'd pitch that tent out there, eh?
Yeah.
So basically you just say to the stamp duty office, I need to defer it for 12 months.
Yeah, that's right.
And they say, okay.
Yes. Well, they don't say anything because it's what you fill out. Now, what happens is then in a period of time goes past and then they work out based off data mining and stuff like that, whether you actually lived in the property or not. And the telltale sign is, did it come up for rent during that first 12 months? Because they look on realestate.com and everything like that. And then they give you a call if you don't get to them first and say, hey, this is clearly not a principal place of residence. You now owe us X amount of stamp duty. If you don't do it soon enough, we'll incur interest.
Have you actually experienced that?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So it's not it's ask me how I know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, we'll get to the next one where I took out a $50,000 personal loan to finish a development. My view was this, I needed to push the limits of what I could to afford these properties. I knew property was going to be my ticket out of corporate eventually, right? I didn't have a lot of money at the time. Over my course of my career, I worked really, really hard and climbed the corporate ladder to get more and more money to buy more and more properties. But every property is a shit fight. You have to deal with the banks, which change their lending rules all the time. As interest rates go up, your borrowing capacity goes down. They look at you on your serviceability. They put shading on that, right, on your rental income. So $160,000 or $170,000 of rental income is not $170,000 in the bank's eyes. They reduce it. So it is really, really hard. But I was determined this was my way of getting wealthy. Other people have done it before me. It must be achievable. You just have to fight.
Did you always have the mindset of buy and hold?
Yes. So my dad, being in real estate for a long, long time, he said the wealthiest people he knew owned houses and buildings in Parramatta and places like that in Sydney, and they never, ever sold. Buy and hold, never sell.
For a guy who knows nothing about investment, according to young Brett, he turned out to know a bit more than you thought. Yeah. So I want to just pause here for a sec because it's very easy to listen to a podcast and hear the opening that I gave and said, today's guest, started with an $80,000 income and acquired $7.5 million worth of real estate. But that's over a decade. And so here we are 2 years in. Your first property you bought April 2012, and it was a shit fight to get every dollar together and organize it. And you bought it in a regional area with low capital growth. It didn't grow at all during that first year.
That's right.
Then you had to save your nuts off for the second one, which you didn't acquire until July 2013. So a year and a half later, or a year and a bit later. So at this point, you got 2 properties. You've got debt on both of these properties. You're far from being a millionaire at this point. Property's not pumping like it has in the last, because a lot of young people who are going to listen to this are going to go, all they've seen is the COVID boom and think that's normal. Right? So it's not glamorous. It's hard living. There's no GT3 RSs in the picture at the moment. It's shitty Kmart t-shirts and a shit bucket that you drive around. That's the life of a real estate investor who's taking the slower path to wealth, but it's a sure path to wealth. Generally, it might not be get rich quick, but it's get rich for sure.
Yes, it is. That's right. There's certainty to it.
Yes.
I didn't know that at the time, though. Like, everything was theoretical up until that point. And I was a little bit dismayed that the property market wasn't moving faster, because I would have had more confidence in myself to continue moving forward at a more rapid pace.
How did you stay disciplined at that time?
Yeah, I hated my job. That's how I stayed disciplined. I've had a pretty tumultuous time in corporate, and while I enjoyed my job, I had some pretty awful managers, and I found myself in situations where I was like, I don't know if I can continue doing this. But not the real estate side of it. I don't know if I can continue working for corporate. Like, these people are awful, and that really destroyed my confidence and confidence from a professional perspective. And it just made me more driven to get out. And property, like, once the properties really started moving a little bit, and what I used to do is I used to go on realestate.com, put in the address, and look at what it thought the market value was, rather than ordering a valuation, because that costs money.
How often did you update that? Or how often did you look at it?
Yeah, I looked at it originally like every month or so, and then over time it stretched out to every 6 months. During COVID, I was doing it like every 2 weeks. So I'm like, I can't believe it. It's just gone up another whatever. And with the property that I bought with Jess, I sent her text messages like, hey, look at it now, look at it now, look at it now, look at it now. You gamify it. I probably should have done more of that earlier on. It would have kept me on the path. But realistically, for me, I wanted out of corporate. I wanted out of my job, and I didn't know another way to make wealth. So I was like, right, this is what I've done. This is what I'm sticking with. It's doing okay. Like, it's wiping its own face in terms of cash flow and things like that. I'll just keep moving forward. The other thing that I would say too is, when you look at these deposit amounts, yeah, the banks don't care if you're going to renovate the property or not, right? That's additional money over and beyond what's required to settle. So they require a mortgage plus costs. With the additional costs that I racked up, like doing painting and buying tools and stuff, that's all credit card debt. All of it was. Now, I knew credit card debt was going to hit me, because every $1,000 you have on your credit card, your borrowing capacity reduces by about 5, roughly. So it's a double-edged sword. But the reason I did renovations, and that, a paint bucket with some Brazilians and not knowing what the hell you're doing is, you can't really bugger it up too much, right? The second thing, though, is a coat of paint increases the property's value, both from a rental perspective and from a valuation perspective. And I knew eventually I was going to get these properties revalued. And if they valued up well enough, I could then start taking equity out. Now, if I left the properties as they were when I purchased them, I wouldn't have that opportunity. And the rent would be lower, because tenants would look in and go, this is shit, I don't want to live here.
So talk us through now the next few acquisitions. So you got these first 2, then you bought 2 in Oxley, and Narang and Pack Pines and Cloverdale and WA.
Yep.
But let's leave the WA ones, because it looks like you sort of had some growth from 2013 through to 2016. You bought 1, 2, 3, 4 formal properties from this point that we've just covered. And then you had a break for a while and started doing some other stuff. So what happened next?
Yep. So I maxed myself out with the second purchase, Rockley, right? Maxed myself out in terms of savings. That's all gone, all 100% depleted. Got a credit card, and because the property I knew wasn't going to last, say, another 12 years, right? It's old, it's post-war, it's falling down. It's a disaster as it presently was. I thought I'll try and do a renovation myself and get my brother and fiance and my mates to help out. And if I bugger it up, it doesn't really matter because it's not a high value property. And so I went out, bought all the tools, bought about $5,000 of Milwaukee power tools. I love them. I still have them today. By the way, they're tax deductible across my whole portfolio. So there's some method to the madness there as opposed to getting someone else in to do the work. And we proceeded to gut the place. There's photos that'll pop up. The house was a total nightmare. There was smoke stains up the wall from the guy that was there. The tenant was in there, was entrenched like a tick, smoked in there. There were empty chicken fillet containers thrown in the roof void. So it punched a hole through the wall in the laundry and just threw trash up in the ceiling. And I sent my brother up there to clean it out because he's smaller than me and no one could fit up the manhole. I'm like, mate, that's your job. He's like,
Oh,
it was totally horrendous. But it's amazing what a few weeks of hard work can do. So I maxed out all of my leave at work, and I just got stuck into this. And we also moved into it as well because I didn't want to pay rent somewhere else and pay the mortgage for this place. So I charged my fiance rent, I charged my brother rent, and I contributed myself to whatever a market rent in totality divided by 3 people would be. And we got stuck into it and we were living around the renovation. I hired floor sanders and all sorts of stuff from Kennard's Hire and just got stuck into
Is this the second or third property?
This is the third property.
The third property.
This is the one on 2 blocks of land, which, as I said earlier, I sort of saw as a crystal ball because prior to the 2011 floods, the property prices were double, which was excellent. I knew that was the path I wanted to go for this house. But in the meantime, I wanted it livable, somewhere for me to live. And then if I ever moved out, it would be attracted to tenants would be attracted to it. So there was holes in the floor because when I ripped out the bathroom and took out the bath, there was water damage, like structural water damage to the floorboards and the bearers and joists. Cut all them out, went down to a local building traders and got the old type of floorboards, put that back in, learned how to lay floors. And we made a huge bonfire in the backyard and burnt it all rather than taking it to the tip so I could avoid tip fees. And then the Brisbane Fire Brigade came and my brother threw them a case of beer and they were like, okay, well, we'll just sit down and make sure the fire's contained, but do not do this again. Right. That was awesome.
Wow.
I just scrimped and scraped, did whatever I could to get it done. And I was sweating on it at this point because I needed this property to value up so I could buy my next property. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that I'm going to put in $10,000, like including tools, into this. I needed to get a 2-to-1 return on that investment. At the end of the day, I ran an automated valuation on the property and the software didn't know that I did a renovation, so it valued up at what I purchased it for. And I was like, oh, shit. But then we got a real valuation in as part of the refinance and a real valuer came and thankfully it valued up a little bit higher than what I paid it for. Like, they took into account that the property was now attractive. It was, you look at the photos, it was really, really attractive in comparison to what it was. And I took that equity and I used it plus savings into the next. And that was the penny drop moment for me. The fact that the market was coming out of a little bit of a slump, but I did all of this hard work and the property now looks good. It looks like somewhere where people actually want to live. I was able to unlock a little bit of equity.
So you had 2 things going for you. You added value and the market was growing. And then those 2 things together enabled you to then withdraw a new deposit out of the equity and buy another house with that deposit.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And the next house, again, it's not glamorous. It was I call it the Mexican prison. This house is in Oxley on as a corner lot, 800 square meter lot. It wasn't subdivided at the time. The house was over to one side, and the shed was on the other side. You'll see the images. There was cracks through the wall. I could see outside standing in the master bedroom where I got bitten by fleas.
We're going to get you to email these to our producer, Richard, here. And Richard, you can throw some of these over because we've got them here just so you can actually see what we're talking about.
This house was a incredibly difficult purchase.
House number 4, right?
House number 4. It was an incredibly difficult purchase, not so much from I didn't have enough money perspective, but the banks didn't want to touch it. So when you purchase a property, a bank goes out and sends a valuer out, and they do a valuation. And then if the valuation stacks up to the purchase price, you'll most likely be able to get funding for it. Well, the land stacked up at $420,000, and the valuer valued the house at $1. I've never seen that happen.
It's a proper shithole.
Yeah, I've never seen that happen before, but that raises red flags to the bank. They're like, we're not going to help you find another principal place of residence property where you say you're going to live in this, because I absolutely wanted to avoid stamp duty on a $420,000 purchase. I'm like, I'm definitely living there. They're like, there's holes in the floor. Like, we can see the grass in the kitchen. We're not touching it. So the Commonwealth Bank declined it. A couple of other banks declined it. And I was working with a pretty savvy broker at the time, and he rang around and eventually got the deal done through a tier 2 bank, which was good. But they saw right through it. They're like, look, we don't really think you're going to live in this because it's unlivable. We think you're going to develop it. But it was near Christmas, and they actually wrote back to the broker, tell Brett Merry Christmas, we're going to fund it. And I was just so relieved, but it was a knife edge, honestly. Persistence. I kept the tenant in. There was a tenant in there, amazingly. And there was all sorts of stuff that happened in that property. Like, there was a police officer, constable. He owned the house over the road. 2 doors up, there was another cop. And both cops said that this property had a rap sheet. There was prostitution going out of there. There was drugs. There was all sorts of things happening. Eventually, when I went to develop the property, the tenant wouldn't leave, and I had to have the property condemned. I said, mate, it's unlivable. Like, based on the recent photos, you punched a hole through the floor and in the kitchen for whatever reason. No idea. It's unsafe. Condemn. You kick the tenant out. So begrudgingly left. And then the demolition works got underway and the build.
Yeah. And what did you pay for that house at that time? So obviously, first house, $278,000. Second house, $243,500.
Yep.
And
this one was $420,000, and that was a huge purchase to me. Like, huge. Even today, people talk about buying their first home, their dream home, for $1 million. I'm like, $1 million for a mortgage? Like, it just turns my stomach. Like, you are going to be working and working and working for the next 30 years. I'd rather have the tenants pay it off over 30 years, and so I'll just live more modestly. But yeah, that was a huge purchase.
So let's jump on that for a second, because I do want to keep our listeners with us, especially the younger ones, because I know the old people who are the old people who've owned assets through this boom, they're just like, oh yeah, that's great, no problem. But the younger people here in their 20s or early 30s that are yet to acquire their first house, they're sitting there thinking, how the hell can we do this? Like, these houses are 240 and 420. Like, I would be where Brett is if I was, prices were there. So what would you, I mean, this is a question for all of you. What advice would you have for a young person who is trying to get on the property ladder, who might be on 80 or 100,000 today? What advice, I know I've got some thoughts, but what advice would you have to try and get them started in today's market before we jump onto the rest of this journey? Because this journey is fairly predictable from here, but you're buying more houses, using equity, etc. What would you say to those people? What ideas would you have to help them get on the ladder?
For me, it's buy where you can afford. Your first property is the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, like, everyone's in different positions, of course. I chose deliberately to rent somewhere cheapish, close to where I had to work, which happened to be a capital city. But obviously the first purchase was regional because that's where I could afford. I knew intrinsically that I couldn't save up faster than the market was moving, even though the market was extremely slow back then. If I wanted my first house in Brisbane, I would have to save for years and years and years. And who knows what happens in those years? Most likely the property goes up too much and I get priced out again. So everybody said to me that has had property, buy where you can afford. Once you've got your first one, at least you're in the game, and then you can use that. Not that I did. You can use that though to leverage into your second. And eventually your portfolio will lead you down a path where you can buy where you can afford. But in the beginning, no.
I mean, there's barely anywhere in Australia now where there's a house for 400 grand. Would that be a fair assessment, or there is?
Well, going through COVID, as prices really, really started to move, I bought a house in Toowoomba for $351,000
In COVID?
during COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, during COVID. I'm talking about now, though.
So now possibly not. Now you're probably looking at $500,000 or thereabouts. But you can still go regional. The other thing you can do too, if you really want to, is look at townhouses or look at units. They grow slower, but they're more affordable. There's higher cost of ownership. The reason why they go slower is because they own less of the land content. It's land that appreciates in value.
So buy something you can afford. I mean, for me, what I would say, if this was me, I think about myself back in the day when I was living in Browns Plains and I was making $183 a week. This is going back 30 years, right? I could save up to go to an event, and I did. I had enough money to save up to go to a property workshop or whatever. If it was me, I would go to a target-rich environment like that and I would network my ass off. I would do what you said about studying a market. I would study, and hand out as many business cards as I could with a headline, "I will make you money in property. Talk to me." And I would try and joint venture with somebody where I would find the property, do the shit work for a couple that's further on down the line and they're for 40s or something, and offer to find the deal, manage the project, do whatever I had to. I would just try and find a way to attach myself to people who did have the money in exchange for, because when you attach yourself to a deal where you can make 50 grand in property these days fairly simply, get a cut of that 50 grand, build a relationship with people that've got some equity. That's what I would do to try and fast track this or try to create significantly.
There's only one layer I'd add to that. There's a few more, obviously you can, but in that scenario, do exactly that. Find a JV partner, go do the work, but only focus on subdividable lots so you can force value instead of just through renovation. So if you've got someone who's got the capital, you can obviously afford to buy more than you could off your own income. A wage is find something you can force value on immediately and get a larger chunk out so you can go and get on your own.
Yes. Or simply reach out to Brett, right? Or people like Brett who've got equity and experience, and just say, "Can I get 5 minutes of your time?" And then pitch him on you. Because and say, "Brett, what would I need to bring you that would be interesting to you as a deal?" And Brett is going to, or anybody, because I see in this country right now that the middle class is disappearing, and COVID created a huge space between those people who owned assets and those people who didn't. And I had a guy working for me who had been saving, was just about to get into the property market. And then COVID happened, and all of a sudden, everything doubled. And so all of a sudden, he needed twice as much deposit for the same thing, literally 24 months later. And so this wealth gap just got bigger. So on one side are people like Brett and us who own assets through that period and got wealthy. And on the other side are people who missed that. And so I think that's a very real thing today. I would be looking, I heard Andrew Tate actually this week, like him or hate him, but he said he did this reel that he did was on being exceptional is the only safety net. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. The world we're moving into is only going to recognize the exceptional. And so the person who does what Brett did and says, "I'm prepared not to eat avocado toast. I'm prepared to live in a shit place. I'm prepared to drive a crap car. And my property knowledge of these 5 suburbs or this part of Australia is better than any real estate agent in the space because I spend more time researching than anybody," that individual will always find partnership, if they're half decent at reaching out, with people who have got equity and money. Because like Eric's problem, your problem, my problem is that we don't have the time to look for the deals necessarily, or we'd certainly be open to people bringing us deals, and the law of reciprocity will kick in where we'll want to work with that young person and help them get going. That would be my advice. I honestly would take her that way.
James, you touched on something really important, which is one of the 3 key things I look for when purchasing a property. So good location. Yeah, they're shitholes houses, but the locations are good because the location goes up in value. They're neutrally geared if not when I purchase it, certainly after the renovation. But the upside for capital growth. So you talked about development. Upside to capital growth can be development or it can be a renovation. The first property in Coffs Harbour, on the billboard, on the sign, potential for subdivision. And I went, right. So similar to you, Adam, I looked at it and went, you know what, even if it doesn't move, if I can subdivide this, I will get greater value out of it. Unfortunately, because I needed to move quick to secure that property, I couldn't do my due diligence in full. So after the purchase and after settlement, I engaged an entity in Coffs Harbour and said, hey, look, can you guys just work out how the subdivision can occur? And technically, yes, the subdivision can occur, but there was technicalities with the property. So the block fell away from the road. The new council laws meant that all of the stormwater and sewage and everything had to pump to the street. Not the sewage, but the stormwater had to pump to the street. It was unfeasible to do so. So that actually killed that opportunity with that property. But as you can see, the second property on 2 lots of land already subdivided. Perfect for me. One house straddling to. The next one, I subdivided it myself as a corner block. So I did look for properties where I could forcibly increase my equity position through effort.
Yeah, I call that manufacturing growth, right? And I've done very similar. And I've got a photo here, and it's basically got 2 stick men. Maybe I'll send it to you, Richard, and you can pull it up. But basically, one stick man, it says hard decisions, and it's climbing a mountain, right? Over time, takes time. And then you hit the plateau, and then it says easy life. And then there's another one, and the stick man's going down this kind of slide, right, of easy decisions. And then basically you see it trying to climb up this mountain, by hand, not foot and hand, like literally just by hand, and trying to get to that easy life. And these are the decisions, like Adam has said. I think social media has changed a lot of things. I mean, we promote on social media. We do a lot of things on social media. But the reality is very difficult to just follow people that inspire you on social media from an education point of view, because the reality is we all follow people that are doing cool things. They're going on awesome trips. They're going to beautiful dinners. They're driving fancy cars. And that influence is changing, I think, this generation of instant gratification. Same thing with me in property. It's taken a long time, right? It's years, 10 years. People won't wait 10 years. They want things tomorrow, right? And, we've got the afterpays, and we've got these different types of facilities that we never had in the past. Like you could buy something right now and pay for it in 4 payments using afterpay. We never had that type of thing back then. We had credit cards that could be similar, but the reality is what people need to do is save, right? And they're not saving enough. Even if you're on $100,000 a year, right? If you and 2 friends, you and 3 friends buy a property together and you save, right? I look at some of your equity here as an example. You bought a property, $250,000. It's now worth $1.3 million. Right? That equity, right? Call it $1 million divided by 4 is $250,000. That $250,000 is better than not having it. So for me, moving forward, is something similar to what Adam was saying, is people are going to have to create syndicates. The reality is on $100,000 a year, you won't be able to work and save enough to buy a property.
The unspoken thing is not only has the income not moved, but the cost of living's massively increased. So the income might have gone up 10, 15% in that time, maybe. Yeah. Right? Cost of living's gone through the roof, like seriously, going and getting groceries now, and property's way higher. So I love the mindset of this and the math of this, but I'm really thinking about, I think there needs to be a real discussion around what are the actual real things that young people today can do. And I think what you've got on the desk here is part of the solution. You've got this product Vertigrow, not to go into this right now, but you've created a business here that can dramatically increase your income and ability to save, right? So I think increasing your income, becoming a really highly valued, really well-studied expert, and then going to high target events and building a network those things are now not just, oh, that's a good thing to do. Actually, for young people, if you don't do it, you're done.
Yeah.
Like you need to find a business. That's why crypto's booming. Whether you like crypto or don't like crypto, if you're a young person, this is a way to increase your wealth potentially that they have to entertain. Starting a business, growing your network, becoming exceptional. It's just the world we live in. You can cry about it or you can get better. But I honestly don't know that today, just saving what you did, I don't know that that's actually possible, if I'm honest, with the cost of living, the cost of property.
Wages, I feel that one person, right, on wages, you will never buy a property again in your life, even if you're on 200 grand a year.
You've got to be working with
right.
us.
It won't happen. I just did a calculation. You, on average, over the last 10 years in equity, right, have built up about $434,000 a year, right, over 10 years in equity, right? That will take a person on 100 grand a year, which is probably an average wage today, I'd say, roughly. Maybe I'm being a little bit generous. 43 years. That's, if you took that the full 100 grand over 43 years, say you take 100 grand, you pay your tax and you save half of it. It's still going to take you 86 years. It's not physically going to happen. So the way I look at it is two things. Either you got to be very, very disciplined, right? And if you're on half decent wages, right, and you're amongst 3, 4, 5 people, the syndicate, for a few years and save a little bit, I think you could get into a property, but it's not going to be a property. A lot of people get confused with property. They think they have a property. They think they have to buy a property where they have to live. Rent where you want to live, buy where you can afford. Similar to what you said, right? I'm not going to go live in Toowoomba or Burnbury, Western Australia. You've purchased a property here in March 2022 for 440 grand, right? That property is now worth 545 grand. It's not 800.
That's right.
Right. So if you're telling me 3 or 4 people that are earning between 100 and 130 grand a year can't save a deposit for this, it's a load of shit, if you ask me.
You can. And the other thing that you can do too, which is what I did, is not all of these were pure savings.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you apply for a loan to purchase a property, the bank looks at your present position. I called in favors from friends. I'm like, hey, mate, Ben, can you lend me 10 grand? I'm 10 grand short. I will pay it back, but I just need to show the bank that I've got enough money. And then what I'm going to do is once I get the loan, I'm going to go and increase my credit card limit or take out a personal loan. I will take on more debt to cover the shortfall and you'll get your money back.
Yep.
And luckily enough, I had a couple of good enough friends to do that multiple times. Again, I just needed to get the deal done. And I called in favors. I did what I could. It's similar to what you guys are talking to now. Like, you can take the straight and narrow, which doesn't give you many creative options. Or you can start to think, okay, well, the bank just wants to see this. How the hell can I make that happen? Bank of mum and dad. Right? I know a lot of people now are still living at home and parents have equity. The parents could take out some of the equity or take out some of their super and gift it and help get a foothold onto the property ladder for their children.
It's Australian property is such a safe investment, generally speaking. So it's a low risk.
So I'm with you, Adam. So unless you're buying in a syndicate or multiple people and you have a job, right, at half decent income, I think you can afford to save enough to buy a property, but you're owning it in quarters or fifths, as an example. If you don't, right, and you are a single income and you're going, how am I getting into the property market? For me, if I had 50 grand savings right now and I'm 23 or 24 years old and I want to buy a property, I'd be putting that on the shelf and I would be investing in business, because a business for me is what will generate the cash flow to then buy the property. That's if you're doing it on your own, because the reality is if you're on 100 grand a year, you will not save. If you're on 150 grand, I have friends right now, multiple friends, dual incomes, 300, 400, 500 grand a year. They're not in they find it difficult, right? With multiple kids, rent, 2 cars, food. There's just not enough left over because they're not in the mentality of buying in Burnbury or Toowoomba. They want to buy on the Gold Coast.
That's the challenge. And
that is but it is a mindset. But the longer it takes them to think of it, 2 years down, forget about it. Like, I just read an article. I own some property in Broadbeach Waters. It's went up 76% in 4 years, last 4 years. Like it's gone, finished. The people that are buying in there are not the people. They're moving in from Sydney and Melbourne, and people on the Gold Coast are being pushed out of their own city. That is the reality. People that were renting before in Robina and Varsity are now in Pimpama.
That's been happening for the past 30 years. Like this story is not new. It's compounded at the moment because of COVID and everyone's love affair with property. It's really come to the forefront, and it's an easy narrative for the media to push. But articles from 1943 in Australia were saying the same thing. People on low or modest wages, how are they going to afford? I was faced the same thing. The same headlines were when I was getting into this as well. And it's not dissimilar from today. Interest rates were high. Property was high relative to my wage. You're saving for edges. It's buying somewhere where you can afford, not where you want.
Yeah.
And delayed gratification. And look, I could have been over the top about being stingy, eating 2-minute noodles. Like I know some people have done that. I still want to have a bit of fun, but secondhand shit bomb of a car, right? I maxed out my credit cards to make this happen. I sacrificed what I needed to. The only thing that I really, really was super cognizant of was having stable employment. Now, I had a tumultuous time in corporate, and if I would have lost my job, I would have been in a hell of a lot of trouble. I would have had to offload these assets or ask my parents or someone to cover the payments. So I needed to ensure I had stable employment.
There's one bit there where you'll get other people, some people commenting, oh yeah, okay, great. Back then it was income 4-to-1 to property purchase price, and now it's 13-to-1. What to pick a suburb, and that's all good and well if you're trying to buy the place that you live. But if you go back to here to Bunbury at 440 and you're still 80 rent, it's about 5-to-1. So it's still the same ratio. It's just you're not buying in the place you're living at Broadbeach Waters. Yeah. So that property is affordable if you go and buy Bunbury, just not at Broadbeach Waters.
Yeah.
So if you live here at 80, 90 grand, you can afford it.
Yeah, but if it's 13-to-1, right, and you buy it with 3, right, divided by 3, you're 4-to-1. You're at the same position, but you're actually sharing it now.
I'd be interested, guys, listening, if you're on YouTube, drop a comment here because I'd love to have your feedback on this, especially if you are somebody trying to get into the property market in Australia. I think we've just got to be very, very careful that, we can't just peddle the narrative of, like Brett did the right thing. I was the same when I was building my wealth. I drove a $15,000 Captiva and owned millions of dollars worth of real estate because every dollar I put in. But I had a massively cash flowing business and I lived really But I think it's at a point now, and we as asset owners need to really acknowledge there is a very, very real disconnection now that has occurred in this country, that it's not just about not having avocado toast and being budgeting. I think young Australian people need to start thinking more about what you're saying, which is living outside of these areas, working together, and they need to become high value people to massively increase their income. The good news is, on the flip side, I honestly believe that we live in a world today that there has never been more opportunity for a young person to use AI, Shopify stores, crypto. There's all these opportunities that have these massive upsides that just did not exist when we came up. So I think there is a balance there on that side, and we are seeing people build amazing businesses with fairly low levels of capital if they become obsessed, and they've got learning resources like YouTube that is a free, incredible. You want to start a clothing brand today? Go into YouTube and say how to start high profit clothing brand, and you'll find resources of where the factories are, what the buy costs are, people who've done it, drop shipping. There's all this stuff that did not exist in our time as well. So if you're a young person listening to this, be careful not to go the poor me route and say, oh, it's okay for Brett, because I see that, I acknowledge that, I hear that, you're right. And on the flip side, there's more opportunity now than ever before as well, if you're prepared to do that work.
10 years ago, it was a lot harder to start a business than today.
Oh my God. Like I was out the other night with young guys that are making a couple of $1 million a year at 22 years old, that was just not possible when I was coming up. So there's opportunities out there today for young people, but you've got to be, the same principle applies. You need to be upskilling, growing your network, getting smarter, and real estate is a powerful way to grow. I mean, looking at these numbers, Brett, I mean, it is a remarkable case study of how powerful property is. What you've done here, Robert Kiyosaki says, when the bank loans you money on real estate, so you were putting down on your first deal $47,000 and on a $280,000 asset when you were making 80 grand. So the bank's giving you basically 5 years of your gross income. Sorry, you're making 80 grand after tax, after living costs. You probably got 20, 30 grand or something, maybe 20 grand. They've given you 200 grand. So they're giving you 10 years of your savings upfront as a loan because you bought this asset class, Australian property. That is extraordinary.
You can't do that with shares. You can't do that with Bitcoin.
You can't do it with anything. So the leverage in real estate is amazing. And so this is an amazing example of how using savings, using the bank, and then adding value on someone massively grows wealth. You turned a contribution of 390 grand or whatever it was into millions of dollars of profit over time.
One thing that I wanted to do that I could never do because my income band moved up. That might not be delightful to some listeners, but I wanted the first time owner grant and I never got to use it. Now, if I had access to that, I would have got another property quicker. First time owner grant doesn't apply to investment property. But if you think creatively and you intend to live in it, then you can unlock that as an opportunity as well. So there are other facilities out there as well as syndicates to help get your foot on the property ladder. So that's an opportunity nowadays and it's still available.
Look, let's move forward. Look, we've got the numbers here. The bottom line is that you basically were buying properties, improving them, buying properties that had a value add, subdivision and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You use the power of borrowing and you use the natural growth that is in real estate around the country. Is there anything else you want to add before we change gears and talk quickly about Vertigo and how this came about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see what else you just want to add to this story, because I don't want to go through all 12 deals here one by one, but let's just get an overall where you are today and how you got there.
One of the biggest things that's really important when you're investing is using the power of depreciation to your advantage. So while you're working, you pay a lot of tax. If you're in the top tax brackets, 47% the government takes for just you getting out of bed and working hard. When you have a property, there's a lot of things that are tax deductible. So any repairs, maintenance, fees, things like that, you can claim that. But that's not too large in comparison to a depreciation report where you get a quantity surveyor out there into the home, and for say $500 or $600, probably about $600 now, some of them will guarantee you will get that back off your next tax return and then some. With the newer properties, it's about $10,000 worth of depreciation for the first 5 years. That's $50,000 you will get back and not have to pay to the ATO. And then what you can do also is you can actually have your accountant apportion that to you over the course of a year. So you don't actually have to wait to tax time to get that back. What that means in reality is, for me, I lowered my tax brackets by 2 to 3 as my portfolio grew. These reports, considering they cost bugger all and they're tax deductible, are the single biggest thing that helped me get chunks of money back that I otherwise would have paid to the government. And I used that money to help fund another property.
It's called income tax variation. It's called what's the form? I can't remember what it's called now, but that's what it's called for listeners out there. So in other words, instead of waiting, as Brett said, to the end of the year to do your tax, and so in other words, the employer is taking more out of your pay packet every week or fortnight, you can actually have that adjusted and more goes to your pay packet every fortnight to be able to spend it on deposit, a renovation, or whatnot. So,
absolutely. Yeah. The other upside too is if you do developments and you happen to sell them, the tax that you pay is substantially less than you working for the same amount of money, because you get capital gains 50% CGT discount at the moment. So
can you explain that just for that person who doesn't like CGT, capital gains tax, 50% discount? Give us a very simple, for the person who doesn't know what that is.
So say you buy a property for $500,000 and you're all in and you develop it and then you sell it for $1 million. Right. So your capital gain is the difference between your purchase price and your sell price minus any expenses. Say there's no expenses, right? So you've just grown the property's value by $500,000. When you sell, that's what the government's going to tax you on, that $500,000 at the highest tax rate, because that absolutely eclipses the highest tax rate. You're giving away half, $250,000. But the government has a thing called a CGT discount, which means if you've held the property for more than a year, they will give you a discount on 50% of that. So they're only going to tax you on $250,000 of the $500,000 of profit you just made.
So 250,000 of it is tax-free, and
That's
you pay tax on the other 250,000.
I don't know another mechanism where you get it so good. Like maybe owning a business, sure. But certainly in property. And that's, so if I made $500,000 as just a normal PYRG employee, I'd give half to the government. Now I get to keep a hell of a lot more of that if I develop a property and sell it, had I held it for a year.
Yeah, that's just that old rich get richer, right? You got to learn to play the game. And the famous words of Will Smith: "Hate the game, not the player."
Yeah. So, when did you actually quit your job?
I quit my job about close to 2 years ago now. I'm looking across to my fiance because it was a pretty momentous occasion. I didn't intend to. I'm going to say that now. I always knew I wanted to exit corporate and retire early. I caught myself off guard doing it so soon. I'd managed to take my properties, most of them, through a boom, through a cycle. Cycles happen roughly every 10 years. I'm lucky enough to witness one, and hopefully I'll still be alive to witness another couple more. So anyone who does that will do particularly well. And I only took, as you can see, 4 or 5 properties into the COVID era. That's what really made the bulk of the wealth here. I then bought properties during COVID because I had enough equity to do that rapidly. And then I rode that wave a little bit. For me, as I was moving through my corporate career and seeking higher and better paying jobs, the flip side of that is the stress increases. The demand of you as an employee to always be on increases. And it got to the point where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't really want to be doing this. It's not enjoyable anymore. And I looked to my property portfolio as a safety net to work out whether enough rental income was coming in for me to quit my corporate job. And honestly, I didn't believe it for a lot of time. Like, I'm looking at my bank statements and going, is that right? Like, am I making, over 6 figures or in 6 figures in rental income? Can it support me? And I just doubted it. But eventually I was at a business retreat and an extremely wealthy property developer and investor happened to be there. And he said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, what do you mean? What am I doing?" Like, I'm a general manager at a particular company and this is what I do. And he was pretty dismissive about the whole thing. He goes, "What do you like to do outside of work?" I went, "Oh, I like to ride my motorbike and go for a run." He was pretty dismissive about that too. I'm like, God, I'm losing this conversation, the engagement here for this person I don't really know. And I just happened to say, "Oh, I also invest in property and I've done a few developments, had a couple under my belt at that point in time." And this person lit up. I was like, "Tell me about them, Brett." And so, similar to what you guys have got now, I kind of rattled off my equity position, how many properties I had at the time, the deals that I've done. And that person said to me, "So what are you going to do with all of this wealth? Because you've amassed a fair bit already." I said, "I don't know. I'm just going to retire and ride off into the sunset." And I was expecting a high five. "Yeah, man, that's awesome." And I got a scolding. This person went, "For somebody so driven, that will never work for you. And by the way, you're aiming too low. You should be aiming to make $100 million. Now, the owner of the company that I work for is a billionaire. And they made hundreds of millions of dollars in dividends across all their business holdings across Australia and globally. And so I knew that figure, 100 million, had power to it because a couple of people in the room had that much wealth. And I just went, I've got no idea how to do that. I'd need a mentor, hoping that this person would say, "I'll be your mentor. I'll show you what to do." And he's like, "If you look hard enough, the right person will come." And I kind of left that conversation and he said, "When we meet next time, in a year's time on the next retreat, I don't want to hear about this fluffing around that you're doing with your property portfolio, these little rocks and mice stuff. I want to hear what you're really doing once you've got your act into gear." I was floored by that. I was so overwhelmed. Every person I pretty much spoke to about my property journey up until that point said the opposite. It's too risky. You're going too hard. Property's going to crash. You're over leveraged, whatever it happens to be. And that's why there's a big lull for a few years in my property purchases, because I lost confidence. This is the one person that went, you're not going hard enough. And I couldn't shake that out of my mind. I told my fiance and I told another well-respected colleague, I said, Carl's just said this to me. And this one person at my work, who was a general manager at the time, has run his own businesses in the past as well. I said, Brett, you will never make that working for someone else. And that was the final nail in the coffin in my corporate career. I knew I had to get out.
So with that advice you got from the guy on the retreat, what has been the shift since then? What are you going after to get that 100 million? What's the strategy?
It's a great question. And it's taken a fair bit of soul searching to get there. So I quit. I thought it was the best thing ever. I got in my car. I finally bought a half decent car, by the way. I got rid of my shit boxes because I sold some properties and I could actually afford it. And I thought I was on the top of the world, and I'd just ride my motorbikes up and down Mount Glorious and Mount Nebo, or up in Mount Tambourine, and that'd be me. And how dead wrong was I? I went into a massive tailspin. The elation of being free and having so much time and freedom wore off real quick, because I realized I can't see my friends or family any more frequently than I used to be able to, because they all have to work. Now I'm at home alone. I don't even have social interaction, working out what am I going to do. So my title, my status, my purpose is all gone. And I didn't realize that was going to be the profound effect on me. In corporate, and maybe as entrepreneurs, I'm not sure because I don't classify myself as one, but I think you're wired to continue to add value to someone other than yourself, to seek a sense of purpose. Now, for me, in my corporate job, it became my identity. I was a general manager. I was this or I was that. And that's how people refer to you. With all that gone, you feel like you're nothing. And man, my mental state plummeted. I have all of this money, which I don't use. I still don't live lavishly, and I'm without a purpose. I realized the other day I was going through an existential crisis. What the hell am I going to do with my life?
Very common.
And I wasn't anticipating it. It just so happened, Adam, a former student of yours by the name of Georgia, she did the Reliable course and took a product to market, which she found in China, and sold for 7 figures. And she's Jess's best friend. They used to work in corporate together. So I knew this was not bullshit.
Georgia's awesome, by the way. We've got her coming on the pod soon.
She's lovely.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So Georgia said to me, we need to have lunch. So I went and had lunch, and she just finished a jet ski tour on the back of the Gold Coast, some huge parade that was in the middle of the week. I'm like, how'd you do in the middle of the week? She's like, I just sold for 7 figures. I can do whatever I want. And I've never seen someone so genuinely happy, carefree. And she said, Brett, find a product, put it on Amazon. You can do this. Like, you've been in corporate, I've been in corporate. A lot of the corporate skills are transferable. You can do this. Sign up to the Reliable Education course and get on with it, or I'll coach you, whatever. And so we sort of did. During COVID, I was bored like everybody else was at home. And I started watching YouTube videos on how to do Fusion 360, which is 3D modeling in CAD. And then I bought a 3D printer and I started producing the things that I designed, little knickknacks for the house, like coffee pod holders for the Nespresso, door stops, makeup container holder for Jess for the bathroom to hold the makeup a bit better, just anything that I could find. And brain started thinking in more creative ways, and you can solve your own physical problem needs at home. And Jess started to go indoor plant crazy, like seriously.
You could make really good money from some indoor plants.
She bought so many.
Now I understand how you're growing your wealth. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, 3 coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get grow lights with them though. Right?
So this is how Vertigrow came to be.
This is how Vertigrow came to be. So when you buy indoor plants, you might have seen a little trellis. It's like a half hoop, and it's just a floppy piece of plastic which comes with these terrible clips that don't really hold the plant to it. And Jess came to me like a business analyst would to, or an employer to a business analyst, and said, "Here's my requirements. Can you do something with this?" So the requirements from Jess were, my problem is the trellis that comes with these indoor plants can't expand as the plants grow, and the clip's shit, and it looks terrible. looks like dog's balls. So I like hexagons. Can you make one that's hexagon shaped and can expand as the plant grows and can somehow affix the plant to the trellis in a more meaningful way? And so I'm looking at these requirements going, holy shit, like how the hell am I going to do this? And through a whole heap of trial and error, we landed on a solution for hexagon shaped, modular, I suppose, structures that can clip together and you can make it kind of go in any shape you want. And then we made clips that clip onto those that hold the plant to it. Now, we didn't intend to bring this to the market. It's just that when our friends came to our home, they saw what we'd done because I made it in bright orange filament. And they're like, what is that? That is awesome. And then we showed them, and then that kind of spurred this whole opportunity on. So
that's what it looks like. And is there a website where people can actually see that?
Yep, www.vertigrow.com.au.
And maybe Richard, throw that over in post so people can just see what we're talking about here. But it's basically like a Lego set almost that enables you to grow a plant in the shape that you want and so on.
That's exactly right. So we decided later in the piece that we'll make it compatible with Lego, and you can stick your Lego pieces onto it too, which is just super nifty and novel. I started buying Lego during COVID and making all these Lego sets, and Lego come out with some sort of plant shapes now, but they don't make hexagons. So that was really interesting. So we've gone down the path of patenting the product, design and utility patent across 170 countries. And I'm using my real estate kind of equity to fund all of this because I'm working out it's pretty costly before you make a dollar, but we're doing it properly. The product is made in Australia. I refuse to have it manufactured in China. They gave us COVID. I'm not giving them my IP. So I found a manufacturer.
Let's clip that. That'll be awesome.
I found a manufacturer in Brisbane that has the right tolerances to hit that because it's 0.01 or tenth of a micron, less than half the width of your hair tolerance to make the fitment correct, and we're still dialing it in. But they're manufacturing it for us. Jess and I designed the packaging ourselves, all sustainable, forestry standard. Thank you. And going through all of this has been a transformational shift in me. I never thought myself as a salesperson, or had even the ability to sell, because in my whole corporate career, I was in operations. I was always in back of house, never in the front of the house. And I'm finding that as I talk to people about this product now, I'm so energized by it, and I just want to share all the great things about it. And I'm so close to it that it's generating sales. And even with me not speaking to people and people coming across it and seeing it, the recognition to Lego is really, really high. And people are just amazed. Like Jess and I went to an event the other day at the markets, and we had it on display with some Lego clipped to it. And you just see the look in people's eyes. They're like, how has nobody come up with this idea before? This is amazing. And we pre-sold so many units. It was incredible. And part of the value I get from watching podcasts like this, well, this actual podcast, is the nuggets of gold that you get from it. So Jelaine, Adam, you asked her, Jelaine D, what she used to make at the markets was $500 to $1,000 a day. And Jess and I had come from the markets presenting this product, and even that was pre-sale. So a lot of customers wanted it then and there, so they didn't purchase, but a lot actually did. We worked out through seeing this podcast that we were making an equivalent amount of money. So that's a good thing because we had no reference point.
So you were doing 500 to 1,000 a day in pre-sales.
In pre-sales.
This is what I'm talking about, guys, is if you're a young person today, that's actually needle moving. If you can go and spend 2 days at the market on the weekend and pick up $1,000 to $2,000, I mean, the margin on this has got to be pretty high.
Yeah,
right.
That's good. It's 7 times multiplier. 7
times. So if it costs you $5, you sell it for $35 or something like. What is the retail price?
$39.95.
Okay, and so it's 7 times less than that, the cost. So there's huge margin in it if you pick up $1,000 a day. This is what I'm talking about with young people. They need to learn this because that makes a massive difference to your borrowability. If you're watching or listening, go check it out, Vertigrow. But it's good, Brett. I can hear in your voice that this is giving you purpose and meaning in your new life. Like that whole Tim Ferriss, I heard him talking about this, saying that when he got rich, he had this new problem, which was the tyranny of choice, which is there's so much that you can do that it's as that it's as bad or worse than not having enough things to do. I got so desperate, I went into business with these two, so I get it, but it's there's always a new challenge. And so guys watching or listening, go check Vertigrow out, because it's a very cool story.
Thank you. It's given me purpose, and it's put a spring back in my step. Like, my property stuff feels like ancient history because I'm not in the position to continue to buy. If I was still employed, I would be. And I've seriously thought about going back to corporate, but I won't because of that. And that's so exciting. And the step-by-step formula that was laid out in Reliable Education, Ecom Tribe, and the like has really, really helped give us confidence to invest and do this. Put the money behind it, bring it to the market, and we're starting to see some little green shoots now. And I said to Pierre before coming on to this podcast, I'm coming on again with Jess, because Jess is the co-founder and co-inventor of this. We're going to make it big, and then we're going to share this story. And it's not going to be ancient history like my property portfolio. It's going to be recent history. We're going to blow it out of the water.
Well, we would love to have you back.
Question.
Yes.
I've got 25 grand. I've got 3 other mates that've got 25 grand. We got 100 grand together. Would you recommend me going and buying a property with 3 other people and buy and hold? Or if I've got an idea like Vertigrow, go after that business?
I'm not going to be contrite when I say this, but it depends on your personality type, okay, and your risk profile. For some people, me included, if I never did Vertigrow, I know I would look back with a level of regret. What if? So for me, yes. If I had 25 grand way back when I started and I didn't have the confidence or the shoots or the I suppose, education available to give me the confidence to proceed with that, it would be property every day of the week, because property is a sure thing in Australia, particularly if you're buying on the East Coast. Now, the other thing you need to mention, think about with your mates is, what's your exit strategy? That's really, really important, because one of you might want to sell out, the other might want to continue to hold. So that you have to put some thought to it. I think realistically, if you're more of a risk taker and you want to make it big, potentially in a shorter period of time, the product route will do that. And if you've got the right guidance and support and mentorship, because it requires people to tell you whether your idea is stupid or not straight away, right? So you kill it before you invest any money in it. We tried to do that really, really in a closed group. So I spoke to Adam. I spoke to Adam's associates, who I knew people wouldn't steal that idea. But I didn't want to do broader customer research because that is exceedingly simple to rip off, which is why we patented it. But if I didn't have access to all of that, it would be property. If I was lower risk, because property is more of a sure thing, but I would need to work out what my relationship's like with the friends, what the exit strategy is going to be, and just really carefully plan that out, because it could go south as well in terms of your business relationship. I mean, you guys are obviously work well together, but mind you, your fashion sense might be a thorn in the side sometimes.
We've known each other for a while, and that's...
Everyone needs a cowboy.
Oh, man. Anyways, look, we could talk all day, Brett. This has been really, really enlightening, and congrats on the property journey. And seriously, when this story develops with Vertigrow, come back and Jess, we'll get you on here as well. How do you feel about being on the mic? You confident? No? Yeah, okay, we'll see. So, but get the Vertigrow story going, because I'd love to circle back and hear your journey through that as well. For those listening, drop a comment below. Let us know your thoughts on this one, because I know it's going to be a bit controversial in points. It's something that at Unemployable, I'm personally very passionate about, is helping young people to navigate the world today. There needs to be adjustments. I am a firm believer, though, that the same kinds of mindsets, even don't get stuck on this numbers and dismiss all of this going, no, old people had all the advantages. That's not true. There are definitely advantages for you today, but the mindset of sacrifice, delayed gratification, hard work, putting in time on the weekends, like Brett would have been a barrel of fun 10 years ago when his whole life was, no, I'm having ramen noodles and going to sit in front of realestate.com.au while all his mates were out partying and spending their time on, doing whatever they were doing, playing video games. So Yeah. So get around this kind of learning, come to Unemployable Live in October, because you'll meet lots of people like Brett and Jess. I mean, you guys will be there, I'm sure, but there'll be plenty of people like you, these crazy people that are trying to box their way out of the corner, like Rick the kangaroo over here, in life, and trying to get ahead, trying to build wealth, and do have limited resources. And there'll be lots of people who can empathize with being in that place. And go and meet Brett, go and meet Jess, say hello, and you'll be amazed how open they will be to helping you with that journey. Eric's a dickhead, he won't, but everybody else will.
that was that tape for that shirt comment, mate. Fucking boom.
Was it Mission Brown, was it?
It was Baby Poo Brown.
Get along, but to get pre-registered for that, go to unemployable.com.au/events. Just put your name and email in so that we notify you first. I want to thank our sponsors, earlybird.ai, and please go and check out Vertigrow. Where's the best place to connect with you, Brett? Are you on Instagram or anything, or not really?
Jess tells me that I need to come into the 21st century with stuff like that. Look, LinkedIn, because of my professional career, Brett Mifsud, linkedin.com, I think it's /Brett Mifsud.
So M for Mary, I, F for Fred, SUD for David.
That's correct. I dabbled a little bit in YouTube, sharing my property knowledge, FIRE Property AU, as in financially independent, retire early.
Okay.
I did a couple of videos, but I would love to have a setup like this. And hats off to you guys. It takes a hell of a lot to produce a video, like equipment plus sound insulation and stuff like that. I haven't produced too many, but there's some tips, and I dive into my property journey fairly deeply and expose a fair bit of pretty personal information to help give people who are interested insights in how to follow a similar journey, or at least work out whether property is right for them. So there's a few videos there.
Just want to let you know, there's a guy in behind that screen over there named Richard. I want to shout out to Richard because he makes a lot of this, happen. So
he does, yeah. Thanks, Richard.
Not just us.
Reach out, follow Brett, connect with him and Jess. Lovely, lovely people, hardworking Aussies who have achieved, multi-billionaire status. And as you can see, super nice, grounded people. If you're a young person listening to this in Browns Plains or a working class area around Australia, you don't have rich parents and you're trying to find your way, remain open, because I know this podcast is going to be splitting young people. Some of people are going to say, just more baby boomers, which none of us are. We're all too young for that. They're going to discount this as just baby boomers talking through their ass. They don't know what it's like. And then there's going to be a few people going, I'm going to take on board that and I'm going to believe what is difficult, because I remember it being equally bleak when I was coming up. But if you just keep your head positive, keep reading the books, keep turning up at the events, keep networking and becoming outstanding, like Brett's journey, it won't show up in the first year or 2 years or 5 years, but something magical starts to happen with the fullness of time. And then it picks up speed. And then one day you're like, Brett, you're a multi-billionaire and your circle of influence changes, your life changes. I can tell you hand on heart, I came from nothing. Everybody on this panel came from nothing. It is possible. The dream is still alive and possible if you use the 6 inches of real estate between your head to remain positive and learning oriented. And I mean that from my heart. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just telling you it's possible to go from hard, difficult sacrifice to wealth still. So thanks for watching, guys. Share the pod, let people know. And Brett, thank you for coming in. Jess, thank you for coming in. Appreciate you guys. And we'll see you all on the next episode of Unemployable.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.